On my 70th birthday, my daughter Jessica leaned in and whispered to her husband, "I'll distract the old man. You go to the house and drill the locks." She thought I was just a senile builder ready for the scrap heap. But when her husband Blake burst back into the restaurant 40 minutes later, he wasn't holding the deed. He was shaking, pale as a sheet, and gasping for air. My name is Art Sullivan, and what they didn't know is that for 40 years I built walls to keep bad things out. And while they were plotting to steal my home, I was pouring the concrete for their prison. If you believe that justice is a structure best built by hand, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Because I didn't just catch them, I engineered their complete collapse. But to understand the trap, you have to go back to the moment the first crack appeared in the foundation. November 12, 2021. The rain wasn't just falling, it was hammering against the roof of the home I had built with my own 2 hands. It was a cold, relentless November rain, the kind that seeps into your joints and makes you feel every single day of your 68 years. I stood by the bay window, my knuckles resting against the cold glass, watching the water run down in jagged streaks. It looked like the house was crying. Behind me, the fireplace hissed and crackled, fighting a losing battle against the chill in the room. My wife Martha was sitting in her favorite wingback chair. A heavy wool blanket was pulled up to her chin, but she still looked like she was shivering. The house was silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a waiting room. The word cancer was still hanging in the air. It was fresh, only 3 days old. It hovered in the living room like wood smoke that refused to clear. I looked at her reflection in the dark window. She looked small, too small. The woman who had helped me haul lumber and mix cement was fading, shrinking into the upholstery. I looked at my hands. They were wide, calloused, scarred from 40 years of framing houses and pouring foundations. I could fix a sagging roof. I could shore up a cracking wall. But I couldn't fix this. I was a builder in a world that was suddenly tearing itself down. The doorbell rang. It cut through the silence like a dropped plate. I checked my watch. 8 p.m. The wind was howling outside. Who comes out in a storm like this? I walked to the heavy oak door. I could feel the cold radiating through the wood before I even touched the brass handle. I pulled it open. It was my daughter, Jessica, and her husband, Blake. They didn't look like themselves. Blake was a man who usually glided through life. He was soft hands in Italian suits. He checked his Rolex every 5 minutes, acting like his time was worth more than the gold on his wrist. He was a man of spreadsheets and handshakes, not labor. But tonight, he looked broken. His tie was loose, hanging like a noose around his neck. His expensive hair was a wet, plastered mess. His eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. "Dad," Jessica breathed. They stepped into the kitchen, dripping water onto the hardwood floor I had sanded myself. They brought the smell of the storm in with them, ozone and wet asphalt. Jessica went straight to her mother. She knelt beside Martha's chair, burying her face in the wool blanket. She was sobbing, a high, thin sound that grated on my nerves. Blake stood by the kitchen island. He gripped the marble countertop so hard his knuckles turned white, looking like he was trying to crush the stone. "I'm sorry, Art," Blake choked out. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He was staring at the floor. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Sorry for what?" "I've ruined everything," he whispered. He began to weep. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was loud, desperate sobbing, the kind that makes you look away because it feels too intimate, too shameful. He told us a story, a nightmare about his tech startup, Nebula Systems. My partner, Blake stammered, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. He cooked the books. He committed fraud. He drained the operating accounts. He left me holding the bag. I watched him. I looked for the cracks in the story. I was used to contractors lying to me about timelines and budgets. But this looked like raw terror. "Call the police, Blake," I said. My voice was low, steady. "File a report." He shook his head violently, water flinging from his hair. Panic flashed in his eyes, a wild, hunted look. "I can't, Art. I owe money to the wrong people to cover the overhead." He looked over his shoulder at the dark hallway, staring into the shadows as if a gunman was standing there waiting. "Loan sharks," he whispered. "Dangerous men. They said if I don't have $600,000 by tomorrow, they'll kill me." The room went cold, colder than the storm outside. Jessica lifted her head from Martha's lap. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup. "Daddy, please," she begged, her voice cracked. "They threatened me too. They said they'd hurt us. You have to help, please." I looked at Martha. She was pale, weak. Her mind was already consumed by the battle she was about to fight with her own body. She didn't have the strength for this, but she looked at me. She gave me a small, slow nod. "Save them," her eyes said. "They are family. That is what you do. You build walls to keep us safe." I looked at Jessica. Suddenly, I wasn't seeing a 35-year-old woman in expensive clothes. I was seeing her at age 7. It was 1988. We were standing on this very plot of land, back when it was just dirt, weeds, and a dream. I was holding a hammer. She was holding a single nail. Her tiny fingers pinched around the metal. "Daddy, why are the walls so thick?" she had asked, looking up at me with those big eyes. I knelt down in the dirt. "To keep the bad things out, baby girl. I build strong things so you never have to be scared." I had spent my life building walls to protect her. I snapped back to the present. The kitchen lights hummed. The rain lashed the windows. The man standing before me was a liar, but I didn't know it yet. I only saw a terrified father and a weeping daughter. "I'll do it," I said. My voice was gruff, sounding like gravel tumbling in a mixer. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky was the color of a bruise. I drove to the bank. I called my broker. I liquidated half of my retirement portfolio. 40 years. 40 years of sweating in the July heat, shingling roofs until my skin blistered. 40 years of freezing on construction sites in February, my fingers so numb I couldn't hold a pencil. 40 years of missing dinners to pour concrete before it set. Gone. In a single wire transfer, I wired $600,000 to Blake's account. I watched the teller hit the enter key. I felt a physical pain in my chest. A hollowness. I thought I was buying their safety. I thought I was paying for peace. I didn't know I was funding a down payment on a luxury penthouse downtown. I didn't know I was feeding a secret gambling addiction that was spiraling out of control. That was the first nail in my coffin, and I had hammered it in myself. April 10, 2023. 18 months passed in a blur of gray. Sterile rooms. The sharp, chemical smell of antiseptic. The rhythmic, indifferent beeping of machines. Martha's fight was brutal. It was a demolition in slow motion. We brought in Dr. Aris, a specialist from the city. He was a kind man, soft-spoken, but his eyes were always sad. He looked at charts the way a structural engineer looks at a building that is condemned. "The chemo isn't working as we hoped, Art," Dr. Aris told me in the hallway one hour man. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. "She's tired." The treatment took her hair, then her strength, and finally her spark. On a Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting by her bedside in the ICU. I hadn't slept in 30 hours. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. My joints ached from sitting in the plastic hospital chair. I was holding Martha's hand. It felt fragile, like dry parchment. I watched her chest rise and fall, terrified that the rhythm would stop. The door opened with a soft whoosh. It was Blake. He wasn't alone. He had a woman with him, a lawyer in a sharp suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. She looked out of place in the room of dying people. "Art," Blake said softly. He put a hand on my shoulder. I didn't look up. I couldn't take my eyes off Martha. If I looked away, she might leave. "I hate to bother you right now," Blake said, his voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. "But the billing department, they're threatening to stop treatment." My head snapped up. The rage flared hot and fast. "What?" "If we don't get the paperwork sorted," Blake sighed, shaking his head. "They need confirmation of assets." Insurance nonsense. You know how they are. "What paperwork?" I asked. My voice cracked. I was so tired. "It's a medical power of attorney," Blake said. His face was the picture of concern. "It just allows me to talk to the insurance companies for you, so you don't have to leave Martha's side to deal with the bureaucrats. I can handle the fight while you stay here." He squeezed my shoulder. "I want to help you carry this burden. Art." I looked at the stack of papers the lawyer held out. The text was small, dense blocks of legalese. It blurred before my tired eyes. I looked at Martha. She stirred in her sleep, a grimace of pain crossing her face. I just wanted to hold her hand. I didn't want to argue with insurance companies. I didn't want to read fine print. "Where do I sign?" I asked. The lawyer flipped to the third page. "Right here, Mr. Sullivan," she said. Her voice was professional, cold. I took the pen. My hand was shaking. I signed Arthur Sullivan on the dotted line. I didn't read it. If I had, I would have seen that it wasn't just a medical power of attorney. Buried in the legal jargon was a desperate financial power of attorney. Buried in the legal jargon was a desperate financial power of attorney. It gave Blake full, unrestricted control. My assets, my bank accounts, my property. I handed the clipboard back. Blake smiled. It was a quick, tight smile. It didn't reach his eyes. Thank you, Art. I'll take care of everything. He walked out of the room. I turned back to my dying wife, unaware that I had just signed away my life. April 24, 23. 2 weeks later, Martha died. The funeral was a haze of black umbrellas and meaningless condolences. People checked their watches. They mumbled about a better place. After the guests left, I sat alone in the house. It was a large house, 4 bedrooms, built on 2 acres of prime land in the center of Oak Ridge. I had built it to be full of life, full of noise. But now, the silence was deafening. It pressed against my eardrums. For the next 6 months, I became a ghost in my own home. I stopped going to the barber. I stopped answering the phone. My world shrank until it was just the leather armchair in the living room and the cemetery down the road. I was waiting to die. I just didn't know it yet. August 2023. While I was drowning in grief, the world outside my walls was changing. I didn't notice when the for sale signs started popping up on my street like weeds. I didn't notice the moving trucks coming in the middle of the night. One morning, my neighbor Mrs. Gable caught me at the mailbox. She was a sweet woman, 80 years old, always gardening. Art, she said, leaning over the white picket fence. She looked nervous. Her hands were twisting her apron. Are you selling too? Selling what? I grunted. I hadn't used my voice in days. It sounded rusty. The house, she said. Everyone is selling. Some corporate group. Zenith Corp. They're paying cash, Art. Double the market value. I'm not going anywhere, I said, staring at the envelopes in my hand. This is my home. She nodded, but she looked sad. Resigned. Well, I took the offer. I'm moving to Florida on Tuesday. Be careful, Art. These suits, they're aggressive. They don't take no for an answer. The October, Mrs. Gable was gone. Every single house on my block stood empty. The windows were dark, staring like hollow eyes. The lawns were overgrown. Every house except mine, my 2-acre lot, was right in the center. It was the keystone. Without my land, their project was impossible. They couldn't build around me. They needed my deed. Blake knew this. Blake was the secret CFO of Zenith Corp. He had gambled on this project. If he delivered my land, he would make millions. If he failed, he would lose everything. October 15, 2023. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen, staring at the empty bird feeder. The birds had left when the neighborhood went quiet. Blake's silver BMW pulled into the driveway. He came in with a box under his arm. Hey, Dad, he said. He had started calling me Dad after Martha died. It always sounded wrong, like a cheap sound effect in a bad movie. What's that? I asked, nodding at the box. It's a gift, Blake said. He unpacked a sleek white hub and several cameras. With you living here all alone.
Jessica and I worry. The neighborhood is empty now. Squatters could break in. This is the Sentinel security system. Top of the line, connected straight to the cloud. I don't need it, I grunted. I have my deadbolts. I installed them myself. Solid brass. Please, Art, he said. He gave me that sad puppy look, the one he used when he wanted something. Do it for Jessica's peace of mind. She can't sleep worrying about you. I sighed. I was too tired to fight. Fine. Blake spent the afternoon installing the sensors. He connected the hub to my internet router. He set up the app on his phone. There, he said, wiping his hands on his pants. Now we can monitor the house remotely. If anything happens, the police will be here in 3 minutes. He smiled, but looking back, I realized something. He wasn't installing a security system to keep me safe. He was installing a digital leash. He was gaining administrative control of my physical environment. He was preparing the cage. October 25, 2023. The day I turned 70, I woke up and forgot. For just a second, I forgot Martha was gone. I turned to tell her, good morning,
and saw the empty pillow, smooth and cold. The reality hit me like a physical blow to the gut. I spent the day sitting on the porch, watching the dead leaves blow across the yard. No one called, no neighbors waved. The street was a ghost town. At 7:00 p.m., headlights swept across my living room wall. Jessica and Blake had arrived. I watched them from the window. They were in their luxury SUV. Jessica was wearing an oak dress that looked expensive. Blake was in a dark suit. They stood on the porch for a moment. Before ringing the bell, Blake was checking his phone, tapping furiously. Jessica looked nervous. She was biting her lip, smoothing her dress. I opened the door. "Happy birthday, Dad," Jessica cried out. Her voice was a little too high, a little too bright. She hugged me, but her body was stiff, like she was hugging a stranger. She smelled of wine and expensive perfume. "We're taking you to dinner," Blake said. He checked his watch. "We have a reservation at Neon. It's the best spot in town. Very trendy." "I'm not really hungry," I said. "I have a stew in the—" "Nonsense," Blake insisted, stepping into the foyer. 70 is a milestone. You can't spend it alone in the dark. Go get your coat. I turned and walked toward the hall closet. It was a deep walk-in closet under the stairs. My heavy wool coat, the one Martha bought me 5 years ago, was hanging in the very back. I stepped inside. The air in there was still. The smell of Martha's old scarves hit me. Lavender and rain. It was so powerful, so real, that I closed my eyes for a second, breathing her in. It felt like she was standing right there with me. That's when I heard the front door open. They thought I had gone upstairs to the bedroom. They thought I was out of earshot. "I'll distract him for at least 2 hours," Jessica whispered. Her voice was sharp, hissing, venomous. I froze. My hand hovered over the wool coat. "Good," Blake replied. His voice was low, urgent, stripped of the fake warmth. "Keep him at the restaurant. Order the expensive wine. Make sure he drinks. I need him confused. I'll come back here and change the locks," Blake continued. "Frank is waiting down the street in the van." "Are you sure Frank can do it?" Jessica asked. "Dad's locks are heavy-duty. Frank is a master locksmith," Blake scoffed. "He'll drill the deadbolts and install the smart locks I bought. Once the new locks are on, the Sentinel system will engage the lockdown mode." He paused. I could hear the smirk in his voice. "Art won't be able to get back in. We'll tell the police he's having a breakdown, that he wandered off. By the time he gets a lawyer, we'll have possession. Possession is 9/10 of the law, Jess." "It feels cruel, Blake," Jessica said. But she didn't sound sad. She sounded impatient, anxious. "It's $22 million, Jess." Blake snapped. "Do you want to lose the penthouse? Do you want to be poor? Do you want to work at a diner?" "No," she said softly. "Let's do it." My blood turned to ice. I stood there in the dark, surrounded by my dead wife's clothes, listening to my own daughter plot to make me homeless on my 70th birthday. Frank, I knew Frank. He was Blake's father, a retired locksmith with a reputation for doing jobs that didn't require paperwork. A man with slippery hands. They were going to lock me out. They were going to claim I was senile. They were going to steal my home. I took a deep breath. I could have burst out of the closet screaming. I could have grabbed my shotgun from the safe upstairs. But a cold, hard clarity washed over me. Screaming wouldn't save me. If I confronted them now, it was my word against theirs. And they had the power of attorney. They had the suits. They had the narrative. I was just a confused old man. I needed proof. I needed to catch them with their hands in the jar. I put on my coat. I buttoned it slowly, my fingers steady. I composed my face. I pulled the mask of the tired old man over my features. I stepped out of the closet as if I hadn't heard a thing. "Ready, Dad?" Jessica asked. She flashed that fake, bright smile again. It looked like a skull grinning. I looked at her, really looked at her. "Ready?" I lied. We walked out to the car. The night air was crisp. Blake stopped at the driver's side of his BMW. He pulled out his phone and frowned. "Oh, damn," he said. "Work emergency. The server is down. You guys go ahead. I have to swing by the office. I'll meet you there in 30 minutes. "Okay, honey," Jessica said, acting surprised. It was a script. A bad script. performing for an audience of one. Blake got into his car. He didn't turn left toward the highway, where his office was. He turned right, circling the block, waiting for us to leave so he could break into my home. I got into Jessica's car. She drove us downtown. I looked out the window, watching the streetlights pass like counting beads on a rosary. Enjoy the penthouse while you can, Jessica, I thought. 'Cause the war has just started, 8:15 p.m. The interior of Jessica's SUV smelled of new leather and anxiety. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands resting on my knees. The seat warmer was on too high, burning against my lower back, but I didn't reach to turn it off. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me uncomfortable. Jessica was driving too fast. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Every few seconds, her eyes darted to the rearview mirror, then to the digital clock on the dashboard, then to her phone mounted on the vent. "It's a nice night, isn't it?" she asked. Her voice was brittle, like dry twigs snapping. "It's dark," I said, looking out at the passing blur of strip malls and gas stations. "Traffic is light, at least," she gathered. "Blake will be there soon. He works so hard, you know." For us, I looked at her profile. I remembered teaching her to drive in my old Ford pickup. I remembered how she used to panic at stop signs. How I would gently guide the wheel with one finger. "Easy, Jess. Just breathe. The truck knows the way." Now, she was driving a $90,000 car that I knew deep down I'd paid for. And she was driving it to a restaurant to distract me while her husband broke into my sanctuary. "He's a good man," I lied. The words tasted like ash. She didn't look at me. She just nodded, her eyes fixed on the road. "He is. He really is." She was trying to convince herself, not me. 8:30 p.m. Neon was everything I hated about the New World. It was located in the trendy district, a converted warehouse that had been stripped of its history and polished into something sterile. The entrance was a gaping mouth of purple light. The bass from the music thumped against my chest before we even opened the door. Inside, it was a sensory assault. The lighting was dim, designed to make everyone look mysterious, but it just made it hard to see the floor. The air smelled of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and pretense. "Isn't this fun?" Jessica shouted over the music. She waved at a hostess who looked bored. "Two for Anderson." We were led to a tiny, round table in the corner, wedged between a fake indoor waterfall and a structural pillar wrapped in velvet. I sat down. The chair was low, uncomfortable. Modern design, form over function. "I'll have a bottle of the Pinot," Jessica told the waiter without looking at the menu. "The reserve? And for the gentleman?" "Water," I said. "Tap is fine." Jessica opened her menu. Her hand was trembling. She placed her phone on the table, face up. She stared at it like it was a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. "So, Dad?" she shouted, leaning in. "How have you been? You looked tired." "I'm 70, I said. "I'm allowed to be tired." I watched her leg bouncing under the table. It was shaking the silverware. Clink. Clink. The wine arrived. Jessica poured herself a glass that was almost brimming. She took a large gulp, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim. "You know," she started, setting the glass down. She forced a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were terrified. "Blake and I were talking." "About what?" "About the house." She leaned forward, putting her hand over mine. Her palm was cold and clammy. It's so big, Dad. 4 bedrooms, 2 acres. That's a lot of upkeep for one person." I looked at her hand. I didn't pull away. I wanted to feel the weight of her betrayal. "I manage," I said. "But the memories," she pressed, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Mom is everywhere in that house. Isn't it hard, waking up there, seeing her chair?" She was using Martha. She was using my grief as a crowbar to pry me out of my home. I felt a flash of heat in my chest, a spark of the old anger. But I tamped it down. I had to play the part. "The memories are all I have," I said softly, staring into my water glass. She flinched. For a second, I saw a crack in the mask, a flicker of genuine guilt. But then she looked at her phone again. No text from Blake. The guilt vanished, replaced by panic. "There are places," she said, rushing the words. "Assisted living. Very high end. Near the lake. They have chefs. They have activities. You wouldn't be alone. I like being alone, I said. But we worry, she insisted. What if you fall? What if you get confused? Blake thinks it's unsafe. Blake thinks a lot of things, I murmured. At 4:45 p.m., the phone on the table buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was a call. It vibrated violently against the wood, a harsh mechanical sound that cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. Jessica stared at the screen. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking gray in the dim light. It was Blake. She snatched it up, pressing it to her ear so hard her knuckles turned white. She plugged her other ear with a finger. "What?" she hissed. "I can't hear you." She listened. Her eyes went wide. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I have to take this. It's my boss. A crisis." She didn't wait for me to answer. She grabbed her purse and practically ran toward the lobby. I watched her go. I waited exactly 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then I stood up. My knees popped. "Restroom," I mumbled to a passing waiter who wasn't listening. I didn't go to the restroom. I followed her to the front of the restaurant. There was a large decorative pillar near the entrance, wrapped in fake ivy and shadowed by the coat check. I stood behind it, blending into the darkness. I could hear Jessica. She was pacing near the glass doors, hissing into the phone. "What do you mean you're trapped?" she screamed in a whisper. Silence as she listened. "You idiot," she cried. "Just break the door down, Blake. Kick it in. Get out of there." She was shaking. People were walking past her, couples on dates, groups of laughing friends, but she didn't notice them. She was in a spiral. "The alarm? I thought you disabled it." She paused. "The Sentinel system? You said you had admin control?" I smiled in the dark. The irony was beautiful. Blake had installed that system to keep me in check, to monitor me. But in his arrogance, he hadn't accounted for the hardware. He didn't know I had reinforced the door frames with steel headers 20 years ago. He didn't know the deadbolts were commercial grade pinned deep into the studs. And he certainly didn't know that the lockdown mode he bragged about was designed to keep people out. But if triggered from the inside without a code, it treated the occupants as intruders. "The police?" Jessica whimpered. Oh my God, Blake. Fix this." At that exact moment, the front doors of the restaurant flew open. The wind from outside rushed in, carrying the smell of exhaust. Blake burst in. He looked like a man who had been chased by a demon. He was sweating profusely, his shirt clinging to his chest. His tie was undone, hanging loose. His expensive suit jacket was torn at the shoulder, probably from trying to shoulder check my solid oak front door. He ran straight to Jessica. He didn't see me behind the pillar. He was blind with panic. "It went wrong," he gasped, grabbing her arm. His fingers dug into her flesh. "It went wrong, Jess. What are you doing here?" she shrieked. "Where's Frank?" "The system locked down," Blake panicked, his eyes wild. Frank drilled the cylinder, but the sensors tripped. The magnetic locks engaged. It sealed the house. Frank is stuck on the porch. The police were pulling up when I ran. I had to leave him. "You left your father." Jessica stared at him in horror. "I couldn't be seen," Blake hissed. "If they connect me to the break-in, the deal is dead. The investors will walk. Who is trapped?" I stepped out from behind the pillar. I walked up to them slowly. My boots clicked on the polished concrete floor. I stood to my full height. I didn't slouch. I didn't shake. I pulled my shoulders back and let 40 years of construction work fill the space. I looked at Blake, then at Jessica. "My father is dead," I said. My voice was calm, steady, low enough to be terrifying. They froze. They looked like deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Jessica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Blake turned pale, the sweat glistening on his forehead. "So tell me, Blake." I leaned in, invading his personal space. I smelled his fear. It smelled like sour sweat and expensive wine. "Who is trapped in my house?" "Dad," Jessica stammered, taking a step back. She hit the wall. We were just—" "The alarm," Blake sputtered. His brain was misfiring, trying to calculate a lie that could cover this crater. We got a notification on the app. We thought, we thought, we thought you were home. We thought you were in trouble. I'm standing right here, I said, eating dinner, like you insist. We have to go, Blake said, grabbing Jessica's hand. He was desperate to control the narrative. Maybe it's a gas leak. Maybe the system malfunctioned. We need to check on the house. Let's go then, I said. Drive, 9:15 p.m. We drove back to the house in Blake's car. He drove like a maniac, running red lights, swerving around traffic. The silence in the car was heavy, suffocating. Neither of them dared to look at me in the back seat. When we turned onto my street, it was lit up like the 4th of July. Blue and red lights flashed against the dark, empty houses of the neighborhood. The shadows danced on the lawns. 2 police cruisers were parked in my driveway at skewed angles. An ambulance was parked on the curb, its lights rotating lazily. We got out. Officer Miller was standing by the ambulance, writing on a clipboard. I knew Miller. We had fished together on the reservoir years ago. He was a good man, thick around the middle, with a mustache that had seen better days. Sitting on the back bumper of the ambulance was Frank. Frank looked humiliated. He was wrapped in a shock blanket. He was holding an ice pack to his head. He must have slipped on the wet porch trying to run when the siren wailed. His drill was sitting on the hood of the police cruiser. It was tagged with a yellow evidence sticker. Mr. Sullivan, Officer Miller called out when he saw me. He walked over, hitching up his belt. Thank God you're okay. We got a silent alarm. Man code. Attempted burglary. He pointed a thick finger at Frank. We caught this man trying to drill your deadbolt. He claims he was hired by your son-in-law. Officer Miller turned his gaze to Blake. His eyes were suspicious. Cold eyes. Care to explain this, Mr. Anderson? The air was thick with tension. The only sound was the crackle of the police radio. Jessica was holding her breath, her hand covering her mouth. Blake looked like he was about to vomit on his Italian loafers. He was trembling. I looked at them. I had a choice. I could tell the truth right there. I could say, Officer, they tried to lock me out. They are stealing my home. Arrest them. They would go to jail tonight. But if they went to jail tonight, I wouldn't know why. I wouldn't know about Zenith Corp. I wouldn't know the full extent of the rot. I wouldn't know the true value of what they were stealing. A house isn't worth a felony to a man like Blake. There had to be more. I decided to play the long game. I decided to let the trap widen. I let my shoulders slump. I made my hands shake, visibly. I put on a confused, bewildered expression, blinking rapidly against the flashing lights. Oh, officer, I stammered. My voice sounded weak, old. My memory, it's not what it used to be. I looked at Frank, then at Blake. I tapped my temple. I think I did ask them to check the locks. I lied. I thought I smelled gas earlier. Before dinner, maybe I asked Blake to send someone. I get so confused lately. The days run together since Martha passed. Blake's head snapped up. He stared at me in disbelief. He realized I was throwing him a rope, a lifeline. Yes, Blake said. He jumped on the lie like a starving dog, on a bone. Yes, exactly, officer. Dad called me about a gas smell. I was at dinner, so I sent my father, Frank, to check it out immediately. He must have tripped the alarm by accident, because he didn't have the new code. Officer Miller looked skeptical. He looked at the drill. He looked at the destroyed lock cylinder. You sent a locksmith to check for a gas leak. Miller asked, raising an eyebrow. I panicked, Blake said, sweating. I just wanted someone to get inside fast to check on the pilot light. Miller sighed. He looked at me, his face softening with pity. Mr. Sullivan, are you sure? I think so, I said. I'm just so tired, officer. I just want to sleep. Miller shook his head, closing his notebook. All right, we'll let it go as a false alarm. But get that lock fixed. And Mr. Anderson, next time call the fire department for a gas leak. Not a locksmith. The police left. Frank slunk away to his van without a word. He didn't look at Blake. He looked defeated. Jessica and Blake stood in the driveway. The red taillights of the cruisers faded into the distance. They were visibly shaking with relief. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought the senile old fool had saved them by accident. Dad, Jessica said. Her voice dripped with fake concern. but I could hear the adrenaline still spiking in it. That was scary. You're really confused. You shouldn't stay here alone tonight. The lock is broken. You're right, I whispered. I don't feel safe. Go to the lake house, Jessica urged. Go up to the cabin for a few days. Rest. We'll handle the locks. We'll watch the house. We'll get everything fixed. Get everything stolen, she meant. Okay, I said. I'll go tomorrow morning. October 26, 2023. The next morning, Thursday, I packed my truck at 8 hours. The sky was clear, a mocking blue. Jessica and Blake were waiting in their car down the street, watching me like vultures waiting for an animal to stop moving. I threw a duffel bag into the passenger seat of my old Silverado. I locked the front door, what was left of it. I waved at them. They waved back, smiling. They thought I was leaving town. They thought the house was theirs. They thought they had won. I drove 10 miles toward the lake, watching them in my rearview mirror until they turned back toward my house. Then I took the exit. I didn't go to the lake. I looped back toward the industrial district, to the part of town where the streets were cracked, and the buildings were made of cinder block. I pulled into the parking lot of Sullivan Construction, my old workshop. It was a dusty brick building I still owned, though I hadn't taken a contract in 2 years. The sign was faded, but the building was solid. Inside, the air smelled of grease, sawdust, and old coffee. It smelled like work. It smelled like honesty. My foreman, Dom, was working on an engine block in the center of the bay. Dom was 60, built like a tank, bald head, gray goatee. He had been with me for 30 years. He was the kind of man who would bury a body for you and never ask why, but would punch you in the face if you cheated a client. He was also a wizard with computers, something he picked up fixing diagnostic machines for heavy equipment. Orta, he said, wiping grease from his hands with a red rag. He frowned. You look like hell. What are you doing here? I shut the heavy metal door behind me. I locked it. They are trying to steal my house, Dom, I told him. And I need to know why. We went into his office. It was a glass cube in the corner of the warehouse. Lock the door, I said. We spent the next 4 hours digging. We called Sam, an old buddy of mine from the police force, who was now a private investigator. Sam brought the donuts and the access codes. Dom brought the tech. Crack open the Sentinel security logs first, I said. I want to see what they tried to do. Dom's fingers flew across the keyboard. The screen cast a blue glow on his rough face. I'm in, he said. Here it is. We looked at the screen. The logs told the story of a digital assassination attempt. 9:05 p.m. Admin override attempt failed.
9:06 p.m. Admin delete. User Arthur failed. 9:07 p.m. System lockdown initiated. They tried to delete your access, Dom said, shaking his head. But the system defaulted to the hardline. You hardwired the phone line in 1998. Remember?
The wireless override didn't work because the copper wire took priority. Old tech beat new tech. Now, find Zenith Corp, I ordered. Dom searched the business registries. He dug juice shell companies and LLCs. It was a maze of mirrors, designed to hide the money. Finally, he found the incorporation papers in Delaware. Here, Dom pointed. A thick finger on the screen. Zenith Corp, Chief Financial Officer, Blake Anderson. I felt a rage settle in my stomach. It was heavy, like swallowed lead. He hadn't lost my money 2 years ago. He hadn't been robbed by a partner. He had used my $600,000 to buy his way into this company. He had stolen my retirement to build the machine that was now trying to eat my home. He had funded his own promotion with my life savings. Look at the project filing, Dom said. He pulled up a PDF from the City Council archives. It was a map of the District 9 corporate campus, a massive glass and steel complex. And right in the middle, marked in red, was my lot. Acquisition target, Sullivan Estate. Status pending. Estimated valuation 22. The number staggered me. I had to lean against the desk. $22 million. My house wasn't just a house. It was the cork in the bottle. What do we do? Dom asked. He was cracking his knuckles. He looked ready to fight. Do we go over there with tire irons? No, I said. We set a trap. I used a burner phone Dom had in the drawer. I dialed Jessica's number. I cleared my throat. I hunched my shoulders. I put on my weak, scared old man voice. Jessica? I whispered. Dad? She answered instantly. Where are you? Are you at the lake? I'm at the bait shop near the highway. I lied. I dropped my phone in the water. This is a payphone. I'm scared, Jess. Oh no, she said. I'm so tired, Jessica, I said. I let a sob creep into my voice. I can't do it anymore. The memories, they hurt too much. You were right. I shouldn't be alone. It's okay, Dad, she said. Her voice sharpened with excitement. She smelled blood. You can have the house. I said, I don't want it. I just want to rest. I'll sign it over to you and Blake. Just take care of it. I heard her gasp. Really, Dad? Are you sure? Yes, I said. Set up a meeting with your lawyer tomorrow morning. I'll sign whatever you want. Okay, she said. Come straight to our apartment tonight. No, wait. Come to the lawyer's office tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll have everything ready. Okay, I said. I'm coming. I made a clicking sound, pretending to hang up the receiver. But I didn't hang up. I kept the phone to my ear. I listened. For a moment, silence. Then a scream of pure triumph. We did it, Blake. Jessica shrieked. The old fool bought it. He's giving it up. Are you serious? Blake yelled in the background. He's signing? He's signing tomorrow morning, she laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. He's broken, Blake. He's totally broken. The 22 million is ours, Blake roared. We are rich, baby. We are finally rich. I listened to my daughter celebrate my destruction. I listened to them laugh about how easy it was to trick the senile old man. I listened for 2 full minutes. Then, I gently ended the call. I looked at Dom. He looked like he wanted to punch a wall. I'm sleeping here tonight, Dom, I said. I slept on a cot in the workshop. I didn't shower. I didn't shave. I wanted to look disheveled. I wanted to look defeated. But inside, I was ready for war. October 27, 2023. Friday morning, 8:45 a.m. The sun was blinding as it bounced off the glass skyscrapers of the financial district. Dom drove me downtown in his beat-up Ford truck. The suspension groaned over every pothole, a stark contrast to the smooth, silent glide of Blake's BMW. I looked at my reflection in the side mirror. I hadn't showered. My flannel shirt was stained with engine grease from the workshop. My boots were caked in dried mud. I had 3 days of gray stubble on my chin. To the world I looked like a man who had given up. I looked like a ruin. You got the papers? Dom asked, keeping his eyes on the road. I patted the inside pocket of my canvas jacket. I got him. I'll be right here, Dom said, as he pulled up to the curb in front of the Vanson Sterling building. Sam is parked around back. If they try anything stupid, we're 30 seconds away. I nodded. I opened the door and stepped out. The city noise horns, sirens, chatter washed over me. I took a deep breath of the exhaustive air. It was time to finish this. I walked into the lobby. The floors were polished marble. The air was chilled to a precise 68 degrees. I took the elevator to the 40th floor. When the doors opened, the receptionist looked up. She wrinkled her nose. She saw the mud on my boots and the grease on my shirt. Can I help you? She asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Arthur Sullivan, I said. I'm here to sign my life away. She blinked, surprised by the roughness of my voice. Conference room B. They're waiting. I walked down the long, silent hallway. I could hear my own heartbeat. It wasn't fast. It was slow, heavy, like a war drum. I pushed open the heavy glass doors. Jessica and Blake were already there. They were dressed for coronation. Jessica wore a string of pearls and a dress that probably cost more than my first car. Blake was in a navy pinstripe suit, his hair perfectly gelled. He was leaning back in his chair, laughing at something the lawyer had said. He looked like a man who had already spent the money. When I entered, the laughter stopped. Dad, Jessica said, rushing over. She hugged me. She smelled of expensive perfume and victory. It made my stomach turn. I stood stiffly, my arms at my sides. We are so proud of you, she whispered. This is the right decision. You're going to be so much happier. Blake walked over, acting like the benevolent son-in-law. He extended a hand. Good to see you, Art. You look well, you look like you've had a rough couple of days. But don't worry. Ms. Vance has the papers ready. We can get you to a spa by noon. Ms. Vance sat at the head of the long mahogany table. She was a sharp woman, in her 50s. Steel gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses. She didn't smile. She had a thick blue binder in front of her. Let's sign, Blake said, eager. He slid the binder across the polished wood toward me. It's just a standard deed transfer. In the power of attorney update, I sat down. The leather chair creaked. I stared at the binder. Inside those pages was the deed to the house I built for Martha, the house where Jessica took her first steps. The house where I held my wife's hand as she took her last breath. I put my heavy, calloused hand on top of the binder. I looked down at the table for a long moment. You know, I said softly, I built the foundation of that house with rebar and concrete. I poured it myself. We know, Dad, Jessica said, checking her watch. It's a great house. Concrete takes 28 days to fully cure. I continued, my voice getting stronger. If you rush it, it cracks. If you cheat the mixture, it crumbles. I looked up. I dropped the old man hunch. I straightened my back. My shoulders broadened. The confusion vanished from my eyes, replaced by a cold, hard focus. And you too? I said, my voice filling the room like a thunderclap. You are a cracked foundation. Blake's smile faltered. What? This isn't a deed, Blake. I said, it's a civil complaint. Miss Vance said. Her voice was ice cold. Blake and Jessica spun around to look at her. What are you talking about? Jessica demanded, her voice rising an octave. You work for us. We pay you. I am an officer of the court, Mrs. Anderson. Miss Vance said, closing a folder, and I value my law license more than your retainer. She looked at me, then back at them. Mr. Sullivan sent his associate, Mr. Dom, to my home last night. She explained calmly. He provided me with digital logs, bank records, and audio recordings, evidence of a felony in progress. As of this morning, I no longer represent you. You can't do that, Blake shouted. I am filing this lawsuit on behalf of Mr. Sullivan in exactly 1 hour, she said. Unless we come to an agreement right now. Lawsuit? Blake whispered. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like wet dough. It charges you with elder abuse, wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. I said. Blake laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound. You can't prove that. You're confused, Art. You're senile. I reached into my dirty jacket. I pulled out a stack of papers and threw them on the table. They landed with a heavy thud. Exhibit A, I said. The Sentinel security server logs, proving you tried to hack my home, delete my admin rights, and lock me out on my birthday. I threw another stack. Thud. Exhibit B, I continued. The Delaware Incorporation papers for Zenith Corp. Listing you, Blake Anderson, as the CFO. Blake's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Jessica. She was staring at the papers, trembling. I threw the final stack, my bank statements. And Exhibit C, I said. The $1.8 million you have embezzled from my trust accounts over the last 2 years using that medical power of attorney. I leaned forward. You didn't just take the $600,000, Blake. You drained it all. You gambled it away. Jessica picked up the bank statements. Her hands shook so hard the paper rattled. 1.8 million, she whispered. She looked at Blake. Her eyes were wide with horror. You told me the trust was intact, she said, her voice shaking. You told me we were just borrowing against the house deal? You told me the money was safe. He lied to you too, Jessica, I said. He's a gambler. He lost the first $600,000 in a month. He's been bleeding me dry to pay his debts to the sharks. Jessica turned on Blake. You bastard, she screamed. She lunged at him, clawing at his face. You told me we were safe. You told me this was for our future. Jessica, wait, Blake pleaded, holding up his hands to protect his face.
I can fix this. I just need the land. Sit down,
Miss Vance commanded. Her voice cracked like a whip. They collapsed into their chairs. Blake was shaking uncontrollably. Jessica was sobbing into her hands. Blake fell to his knees. He grabbed my muddy boots, ruining his suit. Art, please, he begged. Tears ran down his face. The loan sharks. If I don't pay them, they'll kill me. They know where we live. Please, I'm family. I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just the cold detachment of a demolition expert looking at a structure that had to come down. You stopped being family when you tried to lock me in a cage, I said. You have two options, Miss Vance told them. Option 1. I file this lawsuit. We go to the district attorney. With this evidence, you will go to prison for a minimum of 15 years. Blake sobbed. Option 2, she continued. You sign a full confession. You surrender your power of attorney, and you sign a quitclaim deed for your penthouse apartment. The penthouse? Jessica cried, looking up. That's our home. That's all we have. It was bought with my money, I said. It's my home. I stared at her. My daughter, the girl I had built walls to protect. You sign it over to repay what you stole, I said, and then you leave. You leave the state. If I ever see you in Oak Ridge again, I file the charges. They didn't hesitate. They knew they were cornered. With shaking hands, Blake signed the confession. He signed the deed to the penthouse. Jessica signed next. Tears of rage and defeat ran down her face. She refused to look at me. I took the binder. Get out, I said. They ran. They ran out of that office like the cowards they were. They didn't look back. I walked out of the office at 10:00 a.m. I stepped into the sunlight. The city noise was loud, but my head was clear. The air tasted clean. November 2023. 2 weeks later, the bulldozers arrived at my house in Oak Ridge. I didn't sell the land to Zenith Corp. I refused their calls. I refused their $22 million. Without my lot, the District 9 project collapsed. The investors pulled out. Zenith Corp went bankrupt within days. Blake lost his job, his title, and his protection. He and Jessica fled the state in the middle of the night to escape the loan sharks he still owed. I haven't heard from them since. I stood by the fence with Dom. I watched the excavator tear into the roof of my home. The wood splintered. The glass shattered. People thought I was crazy. Why destroy a perfectly good house? My old neighbor, Mrs. Gable, asked me on the phone. Because it wasn't a home anymore, I told her. It was a crime scene. The foundation was poisoned. April 2024, it is April now. The winter is over. I am standing on the empty dirt lot where my house used to be. The sun is warm on my face. I am holding a set of blueprints, but they are not for a corporate tower. I sold the penthouse for $2 I combined it with what was left of my savings. I am building the Martha Sullivan Support Center. It will be a facility providing free housing for families fighting cancer who travel to the city for treatment but cannot afford a place to stay. It will have thick walls to keep the bad things out. It will have a garden. It will be full of life. Dom is my foreman. We break ground today. I look at the dirt. I see the future. My daughter called me a fool. She thought I was a weak, senile old man who could be harvested for parts. But as I watch the excavators dig the new foundation, I know the truth. I am the one who is still standing. I am the one who finally won. Some foundations crumble, but the truth always stands. If Art's journey resonated with you, if you believe in justice that is built, not given, honor his story with a light. And for more narratives that dig deep into the cracks of the human experience to find the strength underneath, subscribe and stay with us. The next chapter is already being written.